welcome to Familjen Friluft, Family Outdoors. This is our first video in English and it's a gear review. Today. And I decided to do that in English because first of all we have a few English viewers actually, which is quite strange since we always speak Swedish. But hi Tracy and Mike, I know you've been watching the channel for some time, and because you commented on some of the clips that we made before. And also it's a gear review, and this gear is most commonly found in English-speaking countries. So I'm trying something new today and making a Familjen Friluft video in English. Today I'm gonna talk about this little absolute gem of a stove. It's my go-to stove in any cold weather like this. In Sweden today it's approximately 2 centigrade, and we've had a bit of snow, as you can see, last night, and it's a bit snow in the air as well, but not very much. And this is my absolute go-to stove in weather conditions like this. It's a multi-fuel stove, and I bought this branded as a Mil-Tec model 95. That's a German outdoor gear company that is specialized on military equipment, Mil-Tec, and it's called the model 95 there. But I found out that this stove is actually a Chinese-made stove called BRS, I think. Yeah, I think BRS 12A. It's a multi-fuel stove, which means it burns on pretty much anything, like petrol. I'm using chemically clean petrol, a lawnmower petrol, which is, I think it's called Aspen 4 in Great Britain, and petrol is of course gasoline for all you Americans, and you would use like Coleman white gas or something like that if you're running it on petrol or gasoline. It still burns all 4-stroke gasolines or petrols or petroleums, but it doesn't come as clean then. It gets rather sooty rather fast. The stove itself can also run or burn paraffin. That's kerosene for you Americans. It's a fairly simple design, and there's absolutely like thousands and thousands of videos on this on YouTube. Anyhow, you just fill it up. that, and it's a security valve there as well, and then you pump it for a while. I usually go for like 50 or 60 pumps or something like that to build up the pressure in the generator. And the generator is actually just a hollow tube with a bit of wire in it, and when that gets hot, well, you ignite some fuel first, and then that will get hot, and after it gets hot, it's actually a self-going process. It's just to open the valve there and use that as your regulator for your flame. And it's got a fairly traditional flame spreader device thingy, the disc here, and a little nozzle there, and that's not optimized for petrol and it's not optimized for kerosene, but it's somewhere in between. It runs on both. You can also run this on diesel, I've heard. I haven't tried that, and I probably won't, because that would gunk up the entire generator, and that will leave me like hours and hours of maintenance on this stove, and I'm not much into that either. I'm out again in the forest, not very far from where I live. I've been out hiking for about an hour, and now it's time for my daily coffee break, or fika as we say in Sweden. Anyhow, for a coffee pot I use the old Trangia, or Trangia as you say in the US, but Trangia as we say in Sweden, coffee pot. It's the model 25. Now this is a branded version of it, made from a company called Lämmelkaffe, which would be lemming coffee, and so the lid there is slightly different, and they also put their logo on the pot, but it's the model 25, so it's approximately 0.9 liters of coffee, and that took me 6 or 7 minutes today to get to a roaring boil, and now it just sits there to get the grains to the bottom. Of course, when you make cowboy coffee like this, you boil it up and then you get it to a roaring boil, and then afterwards you just splash some cold water into it, and I usually pour that through here, and then the coffee grains sink to the bottom and you have delicious coffee on top, and that's probably the ultimate way to make a good cowboy style coffee. Well, now I'm not a cowboy, but I really like that coffee. We call it kokkaffe in Swedish, which means boiled coffee, and I think that's superior to like all other outdoor coffee systems that you could do. Otherwise you could use a percolator. Of course you could bring your like mocha espresso style coffee pot on it as well, you know, those hexagonal little, we call it mocha, you would probably call it like an espresso style pot on it as well, and that also makes really good coffee, only too little of it. When I bought this stove, I really wanted a one piece or one unit kind of setup, and not have like an external bottle of fuel or something and to have to pump that up. I've used the MSR Whisper Light a lot, but that's like 20 years ago, and I wanted the setup to be as simple as humanly possible, so that it could be operated by my children and also my significant other, so that they could operate it as well, and to bring this out. This makes for a slightly heavier, bulkier stove, but I wanted it that way, and also I wanted the pot stands to be extendable, so that you could fit a really big pot or frying pan on it, because we usually bake in frying pans when we're out, and doing Swedish flatbread, or tunnbröd as it's called in Swedish, in those. Also, I wanted a stove that could run on virtually anything that I could get hold of, which would be great in like a prepper situation, or if you're out traveling and don't know what fuel you're gonna get your hands on. It's not given that you get hold of something like Coleman gas or something like that. And I wanted it to be a liquid fuel stove, and that could run on pretty much anything. So that was why this was a good choice. Now, I could have gone for one of Coleman's stoves, and this is very, very, very inspired by those, like the 533 or the Sportster or the like. Now, this is a military grade, or it's actually made for military use, and it's used by, like, I think it's 3 or 4 defense forces. We haven't used this in the Swedish military, but anyways, it's been very, very much field tested, and it's a bomb-proof design, and the price is really great. It's like half the price of a Coleman stove, or 2/3 of the price of a Coleman stove. So that was why I made this my go-to stove, and I really, really like it. It's an absolute gem of a little stove, apart from when you're going to clean it. On Coleman's devices and also on Primus and Optimus stoves, and there's a little built-in cleaning needle that pokes through the nozzle there in the bottom. Don't know if I could zoom in on it. That comes out of that, and which you can operate with the valve on those stoves. Now, this hasn't one of those, but instead you get a multi-tool, which that first of all, the multi-tool is Chinese as well, and with that comes general Chinese quality, which is suboptimal at the best, and pretty much useless at its worst. Now, on that multi-tool, there's a little cleaning needle that you have to poke into that, and of course, to do that, you have to take off the flame spreader and you have to remove the entire burner bowl, and then you could poke into that. But then all of the soot that is in the nozzle will of course get on the inside of the nozzle. So to clean that properly, you have to remove the nozzle as well, and to put that into, I don't know, methylated spirits or something like that, to get it clean again, and then put the whole shebang together. And that takes the good part of an hour just to do that. So I learned a little trick that here, if you remove this part of the generator, inside this it runs a bit of wire, as I said, and if you take that out and clean that, and you put like spirit onto that wire when you put it back again, then you could actually flush the kitchen or the stove just by using this regulator valve, and then it gets sprayed clean with spirits from the inside. And that's a neat thing. Only it took me a couple of times disassembling this and putting it back together before I actually came up with that idea. But I usually do that nowadays to keep it clean. Also, nowadays, as soon as I've closed that valve there, when I've finished cooking, I just blow out the flame instead of letting it die down completely, which leaves less soot on the burner, and it becomes much easier to reignite it the next time you're using it. So what do I think of this little stove then? Well, I've used it now for a couple of months, and I really like it. And how much have I used it? Well, I've used it on a daily basis for the last couple of weeks maybe, and usually just getting it out in the afternoon and get a cup of coffee outside. And I've made like, I don't know, 5 or 6 decent meals on it, and I absolutely love it. It's a really nice budget alternative to like a Coleman stove, with the small minus of the cleaning process. Otherwise, I would give this probably like 9 out of 10. I think it's perfect, and I'm going to use it like all summer when we're going to trek in the northern part of Sweden, in the Scandic Alps or Scandic Mountains, or fjällvandra, we say in Swedish. Vandra I fjällen. Go for a walk in the mountains. Oh! I got my fjäll-anorak, my anorak, my mountain anorak, with all the patches from the fjällen and mountains I've been to. Oh, Kilimanjaro, which is not Swedish. Anyways, it's an old vintage kind of thing to do, to put your peak patches on your anorak, and I really like that. That's cool. So what is the price of something like this then? That depends. Really, I've seen these go for as little as like 20 quid, or like $25 on shops, online shops like Amazon and eBay and stuff, or AliExpress and online shops like that. In Sweden, if you buy this in a store, it will cost you about 500 krona, which is like 50 bucks or thereabout, or 50 euro. And even upwards against like 80 euro, or 800 till 900 kronor for you Swedes. So it depends on where you buy it, and if it's branded Mil-Tec Model 95, or if it's the BRS 12A. They're essentially the same stove. Well, they are the same stove. It's just like a bit of different labels on them. And also the Mil-Tec stove has some real neat cooking pots, which you could actually pack the entire stove into, and they are just about like a couple of euros extra, and I strongly recommend to get that set. However, the stove itself is pretty much, well, it's probably cheaper than the pot sitting on top of it now. The Trangia pot is a couple of hundred Swedish krona as well. So it's not cheap, but it's cheaper than all the alternatives if you want a multi-fuel stove, at least here in Sweden. We would have to go for something like an Optimus Omni-fuel, or Optimus Nova, like a Primus stove or something like that, to get the same watts of output, kilowatts in output from it, and that would cost you thousands of Swedish krona. So this is a whole lot of bang for the buck, basically, in Sweden. In the US, I would probably go for an online alternative and to buy this like directly, because in Sweden we would have to pay customs and like taxes and stuff for this, which would actually make the stove, oh well, just the VAT, and which stands for very annoying tax in my book, just the VAT and the postage and everything adds up to more than the stove itself. So in Sweden it would probably be better to go to a Swedish store and buy this, rather than getting it on Amazon or something like that.
And some of the specs right there, how much it weighs. It's a bit over 1/2 kilo, so it's not particularly lightweight, but considering it's the whole unit altogether, I think it's acceptable. And also you could fit like 450 mils into it, and that together will make the entire package, if you have filled it maximum, you will get like about 1 kilo. But then again, the consumption is like 153 grams an hour. I don't know in which temperature, but I run like 100 mils an hour approximately. And as I said before, I've used this a couple of months now, and I just run through 1 liter of gas into this. So I'm into my second bottle now. And I can hear you go, "Oh, Jesper, don't you mean like 200 mils an hour? Shouldn't it like burn faster when it's cold outside?" No, actually not, because you have to choke it a bit in the valve and regulate the flame. And if you have it full open, I would assume it will get like 135, maybe 140 mils an hour. But you can't run it on that, because with the fuel cold and the stove cold and everything, you have to dial into that perfect, or otherwise you will get like a sooty flame, an orange flames, and you don't want that. You want a clear blue one. So actually you have to almost turn down the valve to a minimum, or a simmer, more than opening it like full blow, because if you do that, it will get very gunky very fast. So it takes a little bit less in winter time. On the other hand, you won't get the same effect out of it, but it still boils about 1 liter or 0.9 in approximately 5 to 6 minutes today, with 2 degrees below and snow and wind. Swedish spring, April weather for you. Today, with a couple of degrees below 0. That's centigrade. And snow. Today I'm hiking the Bo Trail, which is a trail running from Bo, where I live, and all the way up to Värmdö, which is both Bo and Värmdö is in the inner archipelago of Stockholm. And a little other tip for my Swedish viewers when it comes to fuel. In Sweden, kerosene, or fotogen as we say, paraffin, is cheaper than most like chemically clean gasolines or petrols, but if you go to Biltema or Jula, you would get alkylat bensin in 1 liter bottles, and those are just like a couple of tenners I think it's like 20 to 23 krona a liter or something like that, and it's less than 40 at least. I think it's like, I think I bought it for like 25 or something, and you could also buy that in 5-liter jugs, and that is pretty cheap, and it's environmentally friendly as well, and it's just a 4-stroke lawnmower petrol to do that, and then you would get the effect of running petrol through the stove, but for the price of like a really cheap fuel, instead of buying like a Primus power fuel for 139 krona a liter or something like that. Buy that stuff and run that through it, and that will also store for quite some time, so you don't have to use it up in like a month or so, but it could actually be stored for years and still work. So that's a tip for you. Buy your fuel at Biltema if you're Swedish.